It's time for the word of the week, and this week's word is a strange one. It only appears in the New Testament once, and the word is ektroma, and specifically the way Paul uses it, that we're going to look at it today, he uses it as a participle in the dative case, to ektromati. So it's a weird word in that it doesn't seem to fit the context of what we're discussing and requires some sort of interpretive decision-making on our part. Before we go and look at the word in the New Testament, let's look at the word in the abstract. So ektroma is literally a miscarriage, whether that be natural or forced, a stillbirth or a premature birth. It's a non-viable birth outside the normal timeline of gestation. Okay? It comes from a classical Greek verb, and that verb is etitroschein, which meant to cause a miscarriage. Aristotle wrote about a woman who was physically assaulted, who was beaten up, and it caused her to lose her pregnancy. And so it was a medical term that had to do with someone not being able to carry a baby to full term. And in the text in the Old Testament, in the classical Greek, it was always treated as sort of a personal tragedy. Something bad has happened, the result of which this pregnancy was not able to reach full term. This baby was born before viability, or was stillborn, or was born early in the period of development. So what on earth can this have to do with the New Testament, right? We'll get to that in just a moment. The word appears 3 times in the Septuagint, in the Greek translation of the Old Testament. It's found in Numbers 12:12 to describe stillbirth. It's used in Job 3:16 and Ecclesiastes 6:3 to talk about 1, an early miscarriage, and 2, a non-viable premature birth. So the word group here, the word is used to talk about births that don't happen when they're expected or when they're normally supposed to, with a tragic consequence. So how on earth can that factor into the New Testament, right? Seems kind of weird. So let's look at how Paul uses it to describe himself. Yep, Paul uses this weird word, ektroma, to ektromati, to describe himself. In 1 Corinthians 15:8, I want to read the lead up to it so we have context to understand what it is he's talking about. So here are verses 3 through 7 in the ESV from 1 Corinthians 15. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. So he talks about post-resurrection appearances of Christ. And he gives us a thoroughly fleshed out history of people to whom Christ appeared, making them a cloud of trustworthy witnesses, that the resurrection is a trustworthy thing. Then he references himself, and here we get in verses 8 and 9 where he says this. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. For I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. So let's look at verse 7 in Koine. Eschaton de panton, last of all. Hospere, as it were, or as it were like, to ektromati, to one born in an untimely fashion, born outside of the proper time. Ophthe, he appeared, kamoi, also to me. So, but last of all, as if it were to one born outside the proper time, he appeared also to me. So Paul tells us that his encounter with Christ is outside of the normal time. How so? Well, compared to everyone else that he had referenced, right? He referenced all these other people who saw Christ between the resurrection and the ascension, that short period of time where Jesus popped up and met with the apostles, appeared to crowds, and prior to the ultimate ascension up into heaven, he was seen multiple times over multiple days by crowds of people. But not so with Paul. Paul's appearance happens after the ascension on the Damascus Road. He becomes first a follower, a disciple, and then an apostle in a timeline, in a fashion, in a time frame different than everybody else did. So all the other apostles in particular became followers during Christ's earthly ministry, prior to the crucifixion, prior to the resurrection. But even after that, they saw him after the resurrection. Paul doesn't know Jesus during the earthly ministry. Paul's, while everyone else is becoming a follower, Paul was busy persecuting the Church of Christ. While everyone else was preparing to launch their ministry to spread the gospel, Paul's ministry to crush the church was gaining steam. So he's different in the context of what he describes. He's different in the sense that his experience with Jesus is of an utterly different timeline than everyone else's was. But here's the other part of it. He uses this term, which was known as a secular term of derision. To call someone ektroma was, pardon my bluntness, was to call them an abortion. So he uses this term in a self-deprecating way. He says, I'm the least of everyone. Why? Because I persecuted the church of God. I'm the least worthy to be called an apostle. But Jesus decided to appear to me and to call me into this ministry. So he says, I am an apostle, although the least. I was appeared to by Christ, although I was the last of the key leaders to be approached that way. Everything about his experience is outside the normal timeline. And he deprecates himself with the use to signal the untimeliness, and also his first century listeners, hearers, readers would see that term and know that it was generally used as a term of derision. Self-deprecation for the one who used to be a persecutor of the church, who was the last called, and who was the least of the apostles. It's an interesting word. It's a strange word. It only shows up this one term, and imagine someone using it about themselves, not to describe the circumstances of their literal birth, but of their rebirth, and at the same time reminding themselves and others of their checkered past and their glorious blessed present and future because of the appearing that happened to him in an untimely manner. Ektroma, toektromati, fascinating stuff. If you want to know more about words like this, let me recommend a series of 10 big, thick, heavy, dusty, smelly books for you. The Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, edited by Gerhard Kittel, consider the gold standard for etymology of Koine words, where you can look back and see, how did Aristotle use it? How did Sophocles use it? How did Euripides use it? How did it appear in the Old Testament translation into Greek? It's all there for you. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a searchable online kind of a thing at this point in time, but you can find it in a lot of libraries, or you can at least find articles referenced from it on the internet, and you'll be able to look into the history of some of these fascinating words. Thanks for joining me for the Word of the Week, and until we see each other again, Karis Kai Reina Humi, grace and peace to you.